What's up, everybody?
Hello.
Welcome back.
Welcome to another dope episode.
Another dope one.
I definitely told you to stop so we
Oh,
can
my
do
bad.
Start walking out.
My bad. Hey, sometimes
You know,
I be slipping.
your boy's ready.
You know, I be ready to go.
Sometimes
Sorry.
I'm slipping.
Okay, anyway.
You know what time it is. Please subscribe and comment on this episode. Tell us what you want us to talk about soon. These are my notes, so don't look at them. Tell us what you want us to talk about soon, and if there's any topics you want to hear. But please comment and tell us what you thought about this episode, and let's get into it. This is a heavy one. A lot of science. I'm not a sciencey person. Are you?
No, I'm definitely not a science.
Arts
I
people.
like learning about it. Let's get out the way
Yeah,
here.
for real.
Your people get out.
Yeah, so we're definitely art people.
Yeah.
And so this is a
Or history.
heavy. Well, that's arts, you know.
It's history
yeah.
art.
It's under the
Oh,
arts.
that's
Like you get a bachelor's of arts
in history.
in history. I don't know. Education clearly isn't one of our
Yeah,
strong suits either.
Right.
Which
It also includes history. This is a mess.
anyway, today we are talking about William Gaertner.
Yeah.
And hopefully I'm pronouncing that name correctly. There's
think
a
so.
silent
Let
N
me
in there
come down
somewhere.
here.
Yep. That's what she said. All right, so today's episode's about William Gaertner.
Yep.
Okay, and we're going to tell you a little bit about who he was.
Okay.
So, William Gaertner was born in Germany, and he was a young kid that was really into fucking science.
Right. That's it. Just really into it.
And so, at the age of 16, he started an apprenticeship with a lab that made instruments, right? And so, when I read that, I was like, what does that mean?
Right,
What are
right.
instruments, right? And so, at the time, it was mapping instruments, and it was, I don't know if you've ever like walked around an area where there's construction or construction's about to happen.
Yeah.
And you see someone standing with a little tripod.
The yellow thing, and then it's another person on the other side.
Right. And they're
Right.
kind of like shooting an invisible laser,
Right.
measuring the area.
Okay.
That's kind of like what mapping. This
So
is
that's
my
what he was doing.
understanding of. He was an apprentice at this lab at the age of 16. He was there
Okay.
for 4
So
years.
he was learning.
He was learning.
Yeah.
He was learning about these instruments, and he was there for 4 years. And then after that, he spent 5 years traveling all over Europe and learning from different universities, doing apprenticeships in other places. He went to like Vienna and Rotterdam and London and all over, basically, right?
So he was just go-getter.
He was. He wanted to learn this craft. It was very prominent in Europe to a certain extent. And so he really just wanted to learn about it. And so after those 5 years, he moved to the States and he spent some time here. So in 1889, he came to the US because he wanted more opportunity, and he worked at this company. I'm just going to look at its name real quick. Buff and Burger in Boston.
Buffenberger.
Buff and Burger.
Okay.
And they worked in the same field. They were making instruments not to the scale that they were being done in Europe, but he learned from them there, and he spent a year with them.
Okay.
Geodetics. Yeah, there's a lot of words in this episode that I will butcher. Okay. So after 1 year, he was employed by the Coast and Geodetic
Okay. you said
Survey.
maybe.
They basically wanted, what this company wanted, or the U.S. Coast wanted, was instruments to measure or survey.
Yeah.
Kind of like ocean.
Oh, okay.
Basically.
Wow. That's like so there was a need to measure like depth
It
or
really
like
was for
distance.
both. It was
Okay.
for the Navy and for the whatever other military things are in the ocean.
That needed Coast Guard and shit
Coast
like
Guard,
that.
yep.
There you go.
There you go. And so he spent some time, he worked with them for a little bit, and then in 1893, he went back to Germany for like an extended period of time, and only came back for the World's Columbian Exposition. He came back to Chicago.
He said, "Hey, I got to pull up to the
He
spot."
said, I gotta go. And if you know about the World Columbian Exposition, or not Columbian, Columbian Expo, that's where he came back. Huge event.
Yes.
So he was like, I gotta be there. And he's a tech guy. Well, what tech was for him.
Right. Tech, science, yeah.
He's a science guy. So it was very enticing. And so he loved Chicago. And he did move around a little bit more. He worked in other places. And I'll tell you more about what he did in just a little bit. We're going to walk through this really cool spot.
Yeah, this neighborhood is beautiful right now. So we're going to take it in for a second.
Yep.
She's
So when he came back for the World Columbian Exposition. He started working with he became associated with the Smithsonian, and which is
of course. So Smithsonian was like, hey man,
right.
You live right now.
The research, they wanted that research, and he worked with a lot of very cool people.
Yeah.
One of them being Graham Bell.
Oh wow.
Buddy.
Okay.
You know, he did some things.
Mr. Telephone Man.
That's something.
Okay.
Okay. In 1985, he joined Yerkes Observatory here in Chicago.
Oh, okay. Yerkes Observatory. What did they do? They were kind of like the more
observatory.
Okay.
So it got him more into like space work.
Oh, so this is where he came into the space thought process.
He literally was only there for a year.
Okay.
Until he decided to open up his own shop in Chicago, his own lab.
Ooh, and
not yet.
Not yet.
He opened up his own shop here in Chicago. It was literally him and one apprentice, and that was it.
Okay.
And he started making these instruments that he learned about in Europe, that he learned about through all of his different apprenticeships and stuff like that. And word started to kind of get around that there's this guy in Chicago making these instruments, because most of them had to be imported from other countries. Like the U.S. did not have a great production of these instruments.
Right.
And so you might be like, what are these instruments?
Right.
Great question.
Great question, because I'm on the edge of my seat.
Yeah, so he started making instruments that would measure how celestial objects traveled through the sky. They would measure how the sun moved. They would measure how objects moved underwater. They would kind of like, think of it of like, you use lasers to see where the object intercepts the laser, is how I understand it. A lot of mirrors, a lot of lasers.
Got you, okay.
And it's multiple objects to measure, multiple instruments to measure different kinds of objects.
Yeah, so he made a different array of things. Yeah.
Right, yeah. And so when word got around that he was doing this, his business kind of blew up. And one of his main supporters was the president of MIT, who he later became the president of MIT.
So he was on the radar of all the big schools at the time.
Exactly.
Harvard, MIT.
Yep. He became super popular. And at the time when years before he started his business, when most of these instruments were being imported, now for the first time ever, they were being exported, and it was right here out of Chicago.
And that's where your boy about to take over.
So so he blew up. Yeah. And he needed to. He acquired one other business, and he needed more space.
Yep. Which brings us to our next spot. Let's get it. All right. So right now we are here at 1201 West Wrightwood, and this building right here is where he moved to. The Gaertner Scientific Corporation is what he named this business once they blew up.
And they incorporated.
That was 1923. Yep. 1924, things were moving fast. Obviously, we told you he was blowing up. Yeah. Everybody wanted his instruments. Everybody wanted the knowledge that he had. Of how to use it. So that's what they did. He started shipping again, continued to ship, because I know you said that already. 1924, also, he began creating the oxygen regulator. And so what the oxygen regulator was basically to control the oxygen of the astronomics and aeronautics.
Astronomics?
Yeah, I think it's astronomics. Whatever.
Sure.
Basically,
science.
Airspace for the pilots and passengers that were traveling in high altitude. Yes, in flight. In 1925, what he did was he created the S2P bomb sight. And if you don't know what a bomb sight is, don't worry, I didn't know either, she didn't know. Basically, a bomb sight was air-to-ground missiles so that it could read accuracy in how to kind of like follow a path and hit the target. He created that, and that was for the Army, the Navy, the Marines, basically our.
Because at this point, they're kind of prepping for World War II.
They were kind of prepping for it at this point, which brings me to a very good point. During both world wars, all of his buildings, including the Gaertner building right here, were used to create kind of like in secrecy, these different pieces of equipment for the wars.
Right.
And so that obviously he had been making things for other countries.
Right.
you need a place to kind of be in secrecy now that we are all against each other. So yeah, that's what this building and the other ones were used for. Kind of to sum it up for you and kind of like jump and move ahead, he continued success. Okay.
Yeah. I do have a list of like the stuff that he made.
Yes, yeah, we will list it right here for you, because there's a lot of things that we can't pronounce and you probably don't know what it is anyway. So we'll list it. But success continued. As a matter of fact, he continued to work with a lot of universities, particularly here in Chicago.
The University of Chicago.
University of Chicago.
It was actually one of his first commissions.
Yes.
The University of Chicago and the University of Wisconsin.
Yeah, I'm gonna get to that in a second here, because upon close to his death, 1947, his instruments were doing so well. 80% of all things manufactured scientifically, instrument-wise, was created right here in the United States. By him. Perhaps out of this building and the other ones that he had. Unfortunately, and kind of leading up to what I'm saying, he passed away the next year, 1948. And upon that death, he had written in his will that majority of all the ownership and patents and everything that he was working on would go to the University of Chicago, and they would have to wait and sit on it for some time before they can get all the full rights.
Yeah.
And I think it was 21 years they had to wait for all the legalities to finally play out according to his will. And that was a long time ago, so that time has passed, and one can assume that the University of Chicago, the same people that created the divisiveness in Chicago, I don't want to say that, but they own this now. So what a way.
Yeah, and you can also see a lot of the instruments that he created at like naval observatories and sites like that. There's a few in Washington, D.C. They're held in museums for people to go look at them. They're so
Smithsonian
specifically.
You can go there and check out. He was part of the Scientific Academy of Measuring Arts or something like that. Apparatuses. He is legendary. He's pioneer awards left and right.
Very entrepreneurial.
Very entrepreneurial.
I mean,
right here in Chicago, and I bet you didn't know it came out of this building.
You might actually pass by this building all the time.
I'm sure you do, because there's something here that you want.
I feel like the lesson from this is like literally how we found out about this is we drove by this building and I saw the name and I was like, what does that mean?
What is that?
And I looked it up and went down a rabbit hole, and I feel like that is so Chicago. Like there's so many buildings.
Speaking of which, so Chicago, you can tell that this was an old building of some sort because it has balconies now, and they're repurposed with that same wiring.
Right. So. Fun fact, and we learned this on one of the architecture tours, the Chicago Architecture Center tours, is that if the balcony is attached to the building by wire, it means the building was repurposed and the balconies are not original. So
there you have it.
There you have it.
Again, another dope lesson from Chicagoans like me and Sarah. And on that note, if you want to keep supporting us,
yes, please.
Go ahead.
Subscribe, like, comment. Tell us what was your most enjoyable thing about this. Give us a big thumbs up because this was science and we don't do science. So give us a little heart and a comment. Comment a little heart.
I'm thinking about the beginning of this episode. That shit was funny. Anyway,
that too.
we strongly like y'all, and we'll see you next time.
Next week is a fun episode.
Next week is a fun episode.
They're all fun.
Y'all gonna be like, what are y'all doing? No, anyway, no spoilers.
We're leaving Chicago.
Peace.